It's time to do our weekly fantasy football rankings for week 13 in the Ultimate Rankings forum. If you enjoy the Ultimate Rankings, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe. Let's get into it and let's talk running backs first. We'll start in the S tier. I had a pretty big tier, S tier for running backs this week because all these guys have been performing very well. And there's a lot of good matchups in this tier as well. We'll start with Joe Mixon playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. Best matchup of the week should go absolutely off. Devon Achane has continued to go off, has a decent matchup against Green Bay. Saquon, tough matchup, as well as Bijan, tough matchup. Saquon has Baltimore. Bijan has the Chargers. Both those teams have been top 5 in defense against running backs this year, but they're Saquon and Bijan, right? Alvin Kamara playing the Rams is a very good matchup. You got Derrick Henry against the Eagles in here. Then you've got guys like Josh Jacobs, who has continued to go off. Josh Jacobs continues to be a guy now that you have to put in the S tier this week after what he's been able to do playing the Miami Dolphins. Jahmyr Gibbs has continued to be absolutely incredible. You do still have David Montgomery kind of suffering some, minor tic-tacky injuries, so that's something to keep an eye on. Jahmyr Gibbs has benefited from that, I think, from a production standpoint a little bit. And then I put Chase Brown in this tier as well because Chase Brown really has been an S tier back since he's been on the field. Playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers have a good defense overall, good at forcing turnovers. They're not like a top 5 defense against running backs or anything. So all these guys are guys that I think if you have them this week, you start them for sure.
Yeah, then the A tier is going to be a little smaller, just a couple of guys that, again, if they were being more productive the last couple of weeks, they would generally be in the S tier, but we need to see it again from them. They've been more inconsistent. Breece Hall has had some really, really good games, has had some really, really poor games as well. We just don't trust that offense as a whole. CMC, we would hope that he can expect that he gets a bounce back in the Buffalo game with Purdy coming back healthy, but again, even with Purdy on the field, CMC has only had like 14 to 20 points, which is not the general CMC upside that you're expecting. So hopefully that can increase as the season goes on. Kenneth Walker, again, going to be more boom bust. He's got the Jets this week, kind of a neutral matchup, but we'll see if he can kind of raise his ceiling a little bit more than he's demonstrated the last month. And then Kyron Williams at the tail end of this tier, very similar to Kenneth Walker. He's had like 10 points the last 4 weeks. He hasn't lost you a week, but he's definitely not winning you weeks right now. He has not been one of the most ultra productive running backs that we expected after the first half of the season and what he was showcasing when Puka was out. Cooper Kupp and Puka are really hurting his production, honestly, and that's something that's probably not going to go away rest of the season.
We'll start the next tier here with James Cook, who's the running back 13 on the season. When you're looking at James Cook's last couple games, he has been very productive, 19, 15, and 11 points. He has scored 2 touchdowns and 1 touchdown in the last 2 games, respectively, though. And you do need to take into consideration that if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's going to have a little bit lower floor. That being said, he's a running back 14 on the week. So Chuba Hubbard's going to be here as well. Didn't really lose anything to Jonathan Brooks yet. We'll see if it does, but it's a good matchup for Chuba Hubbard. Tampa Bay has given up the 8th most points to running back this year. Aaron Jones playing the Cardinals should be a fairly high-scoring game there. 45.5 is the over-under Vegas line. Tony Pollard playing the Commanders, and then David Montgomery playing the Chicago Bears. All these are decent matchups. There's really not a bad matchup in this tier, and all of these guys, especially David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, James Cook playing in good offenses. You like putting these guys in at your running back 2 slot this week. So
yeah, at the top of the C tier, we're going to have Bucky Irving. Got to give him his respect. A 27-point game last week against the Giants. They have just as friendly a matchup this week against Carolina. I think he's going to be really, really solid. Isaiah Pacheco, we expect big things from him coming back from the broken leg, his first week back in the Chiefs offense. We'll see how slowly they ease him back into his workload. They're playing Vegas. We'll see how much it is Pacheco versus Kareem Hunt with his first game back. But again, we expect Pacheco to get a majority of the work right out the gate. Jonathan Taylor has just plummeted down our rankings. We're no longer being patient with that situation and with JT. He is not producing and he is not scoring you straight up fantasy points. He's not getting touchdowns. He's not getting enough red zone opportunity. He's not punching the ball into the end zone. This is where Jonathan Taylor belongs. James Conner is going to be right behind him. James Conner, the reason he's so low this week is not because we're giving up on him or anything. He just has one of the tougher matchups in the league against Minnesota. So that'll be tough for him production-wise. They're probably going to really lean on Marv and Trey McBride in the passing game primarily. DeAndre Swift against Detroit, same sort of story. Not giving up on DeAndre Swift, just going to be more built for the wide receivers in that offense. And then B-Rob, we've moved up B-Rob. Even though he hasn't been producing since he came back healthy, Austin Eckler is now out with an injury with the concussion where he was knocked out for a little bit. So, I mean, honestly, the next few weeks, B-Rob could even move up these rankings a little bit. He just needs to show that he can produce when Eckler is not on the field. Who knows if Jeremy McNichols is going to eat into that workload this week against Tennessee. So that's TBD. J.K. Dobbins got banged up with an alleged knee injury against the Ravens on Monday Night Football. We'll see what that amounts to, but we're knocking him down a little bit this week against Atlanta.
At the top of the D's tier here, Najee has a tough matchup against Cincinnati. Cincinnati's been very good this year against running backs. Ramondre playing the Colts, top 5 matchup for him. Tyron Tracy playing the Dallas Cowboys, top 5 matchup for him. Rashad White playing the Carolina Panthers, top 5 matchup for him, top 1 matchup for him. And Rico Dowdle playing the Giants, top 5 matchup for him. So you have teams that have allowed the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth most fantasy points, and you've got those guys playing these teams this week: Rico Dowdle, Rashad White, Tyron Tracy, and Ramondre Stevenson. It makes them pretty good flex options this week. I'm flexing all of those guys. You also have Nick Chubb playing the Denver Broncos, an average opponent for Nick Chubb, but he did have 20 points in his last game because he had 2 touchdowns. I wouldn't expect 20 points every game from Nick Chubb. Again, he's going to be a little bit more touchdown dependent as the season goes on, I think.
Yeah, then closing out the F tier, you're going to have a bunch of kind of backup caliber guys that you're not super comfortable flexing any given week. Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby are both going to be in this tier. They're both really not consistent or effective or efficient, period. Javonte Williams will also be in this tier, kind of the same story, and now Audric Esime is a concern. And then you got your backups. You got Jalen Warren tied to Najee Harris, Tyler Algier tied to Bijan. You got Gus Edwards with Dobbins. Gus Edwards will move up these rankings if Dobbins is out for a little bit, but we'll see what happens there. Roshan Johnson is getting some goal line carries, but not a ton of work outside of that. Amir Abdullah and Alexander Madison, whoever ends up playing this week against Kansas City can maybe produce. If it's both of them, neither of them are going to produce. We're just assuming that both of them are going to be in the lineup, but we'll see on that. All
right, let's jump over to wide receivers now. Talk about the S tier. A.J. Brown has the best matchup of the week against the Baltimore Ravens, who have given up the second most points to wide receivers this year. Over under 49.5 total points. Should be a dynamite matchup for A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith this week. Nico Collins, also a great matchup against Jacksonville, 4th most points to receivers. Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown round out this tier. Jamar Chase, obviously against Pittsburgh Steelers, tough matchup. Amon-Ra against the Chicago Bears, tough matchup. The same Chicago Bears secondary, same Jalen Johnson that just held Justin Jefferson to 2 catches. And so Justin Jefferson goes against Arizona. 45.5 is going to be his total points over under. The Arizona games are starting to get moved down a little bit in the Vegas line total points. They've actually been lower scoring games recently. The Seahawks game ended up being lower scoring. And then Puka's been scoring, consistently 18 to 25 points when he's been on the field since he's gotten back from injury. So all of these guys are S-tier caliber starts for you this week.
Yep. Then the A tier, we're going to start with Garrett Wilson. He's a little more inconsistent, but he is clearly the wide receiver one, the lead wide receiver in that offense. Devontae Adams has not really hurt him at all. It's maybe even helped him out a little bit. Cooper Kupp continues to be productive, even with Puka Nacua on the field. As long as Cooper Kupp's healthy, Cooper Kupp belongs in this range because he's got the touchdown upside. He's getting plenty of targets to be productive, score 15 to 20 points a week. Not as high of a ceiling as Puka Nacua, but he's still. How can I even say that? Like, he's scored the exact same amount of points as Puka the last 2 weeks, so he's been great. Nothing negative to say about Cooper Kupp. Mike Evans continues to get better after coming back from that hamstring injury. He had 12 points fresh off of that IR stint, and I think he's going to be fine with Baker. Drake London is going to be in this range consistently. He's so good for the Falcons. He's so good for Kirk Cousins. He's going to continue to be a wide receiver one in our book for the rest of the season unless something crazy happens. But George Pickens, I think, is going to bounce back from a tougher week in the snow. He's got Cincinnati this week, which is going to be, I think, a lot more of a friendly matchup than the snow matchup with Cleveland. Cortland Sutton, just skyrocketing up our rankings, man. You can't not have him here. The last 4 weeks, I think he's been like a top 3 to 4 wide receiver. He's been absolutely ridiculous. Lights out. Same with Bo Nix. Bo Nix has been a reason he's been so productive. CeeDee Lamb at the tail end of this tier. Cap ceiling, nice floor that he's shown the last couple of weeks. 2 16-point games with Cooper Rush. That was encouraging to see. He's just not going to be much higher than this, probably, unless he goes nuclear, but we don't really expect that given the situation in Dallas.
Starting at the B tier, it's Operation Can Tyreek Hill score more than Jonnu Smith? And so far the answer has been no. And he has a tough matchup this week against the Green Bay Packers, who have allowed the 7th least amount of points to wide receivers this week. Terry McLaurin right below him also has a tough matchup against Tennessee, allowed the 4th least amount of points. Jackson Smith and Jigba has the toughest matchup in this tier against the Jets, who have allowed the least points to wide receivers. So 3 tough matchups here to start. Zay Flowers, obviously he's been, solid, had a solid game this last week, and he's playing the Philadelphia Eagles. Should be a good game for him, although the Eagles secondary has been much improved since the beginning of the season. I will say that. Those freaking rookies they drafted, man. Malik Neighbors playing the Dallas Cowboys. Should be a good matchup for Malik, but again, the quarterback play there is obviously an issue. And then T. Higgins, when he's been on the field, he's averaging 18.5 points per game. He's playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a tough matchup for him, but he is somebody that I think all of these guys you're putting into your flex spots at minimum this week just because of the upside they carry, even in tough matchups where you're not as confident that they're going to score 20 points. You do have to start him for the upside.
Yeah, then the C tier, DJ Moore has a really great game with another 7-target game. He hauls in all of it. He has like 25, 30 points or something like that this last week against Minnesota. Hopefully he can continue that production for a second straight week. We're optimistic. We're moving him up to wide receiver 20 because of it. Lab McConkey and Calvin Ridley are going to be next. Very kind of boom or bust wide receivers, honestly. And this week, I think we're betting on both of them having decent games. Calvin Ridley playing Washington, that's a neutral matchup. And then Lab McConkey playing Atlanta, also neutral. Marvin Harrison Jr., again, another very inconsistent guy. But he's got Minnesota. We're not expecting a ton from James Conner in the run game this week, which means by default, we expect Marvin Harrison to probably have a solid game because Minnesota allows quite a bit of production to wide receivers. And then Khalil Shakir and DK Metcalf will be at the tail end of this tier. They're very, very different wide receivers. They end up just being right next to each other with our prediction for them in week 13. Shakir is pretty much without a shadow of a doubt going to be in this range because he's so consistent. DK Metcalf, he could be way higher than this or way lower than this, so we put him right in the middle.
Yeah, there you go. Brian Thomas playing Houston. It's a good matchup for him. Again, how productive can he be with Mac Jones without Trevor Lawrence? And is he touchdown dependent? Those are the three main questions that we need to answer there. Juwan Jennings playing the Buffalo Bills, tough matchup for him, but he's been continually good without Brandon Ayuk in the field this year. Darnell Mooney, obviously still dealing with some injuries and has a really tough matchup this week against the Chargers. Jacoby Myers also has, it's a middle-of-the-road matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. You have Devonta Smith in a high-scoring matchup and a really good matchup. He's a must-start in every league this week. 49.5 points is the total line, and again, playing Baltimore. And then Tank Dell, I think, in my opinion, is probably a must-start every week, or this week as well, playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, and again, both of these teams, Devonta Smith and Tank Dell, and playing for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Houston Texans have matchups that are very, very favorable for wide receivers. I think these are two of the better flex options this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, then in the F tier, Jalen Waddle is back to life, apparently. It probably may only be for 1 week because Green Bay is going to be a tougher matchup. They have allowed the least amount of points to wide receivers on the year so far, so expect some regression for Jalen Waddle. We'll see what the target volume looks like and if he can maintain this, though. Devontae Adams, again, same sort of situation, not been consistent, has had a super low floor. DeAndre Hopkins continues to try to figure out his role in Kansas City's offense. Sometimes that's just attracting a lot of attention so that other guys in that offense can be productive, like Noah Gray dropping 4 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. Rashad Bateman is very boom bust, but I mean, that boom bust has become kind of a little more consistent. He just had another touchdown this week against the LA Chargers. He's a 17-point game in week 10 against Cincinnati, 22-point game, week 7 against Tampa Bay. It's anyone's guess when he's going to have a touchdown and a big play, but he's kind of been a pleasant surprise this year and has really carved out a nice role in Baltimore's offense. We'll see what he can do this week against Philadelphia, which is going to be a neutral matchup for him. And then you've got Jaden Reed at the end of this tier. The reason he's so low is because he's just straight up not producing. I mean, the last month alone, Jaden Reed has had 5, 9, 16, 7, and 3 points. 1 16-point game against Detroit. Outside of that, the dude has commanded 4, 3, 2, and 3 targets. He's not getting volume. He's not getting consistent production. The crazy thing is he's still wide receiver 13 on the year. Yeah. I don't even know how that's possible. I don't know. But the production is just not. It's not there right now.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So last year here, Leggett. Leggett has honestly been solid in spurts this year. And even though he is, that's a throwback, even though he is only the wide receiver 57 on the year, again, 9 points last week and didn't have a touchdown. So maybe, working out of that touchdown dependency that we've seen from him so far this year, that's what we can hope. Cedric Tillman, again, back down to earth, maybe still start him as a high upside flex. Jerry Jeudy, he's been more consistent, so we like him as a more consistent flex anyways. Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen both have the Lions this week, should be a high scoring game. The Lions secondary gives up a lot of points. I like it. J-Mo's playing in that game as well. Again, Chicago's secondary not as good, this isn't as good a matchup for Jameson Williams. However, I do feel like he could thrive in a week where you might not have Amon-Ra St. Brown because of the matchup. And then you've got Debo. Debo's been not productive. Nothing. Jordan Addison, who is, again, hit or miss with touchdowns, but this is a solid matchup for him. It's a good matchup for Michael Pittman Jr., so maybe you think about starting him. He's had a good couple weeks.
And Downs is week to week now.
So probably going to start Pittman this week, honestly.
Yeah, yep.
He could honestly be in the F tier if we wanted him to. And then Keon Coleman, we're going to have last here playing the San Francisco 49ers. A decent matchup for him. We'll see if he plays. He's obviously still coming off of the wrist injury. So let's jump over and do some tight ends real quick.
Yeah, so tight ends, we got the S tier with Bowers, Kittle, McBride, and Kelsey. I don't think anyone's going to argue this. Bowers and George Kittle are, without a question, every single week going to be in this tier. We put McBride and Kelsey in the S tier this week because they both have really solid matchups. McBride has Minnesota, where they're going to be prioritizing the passing game because Minnesota doesn't allow that much production to running backs. And then Travis Kelsey is playing Vegas, and he's had Vegas' number for years. So with all of these guys, I think you're expecting a lot from them. Trey McBride, I want to highlight, he had a 15-target game last week. So and he's just an absolute target hog. He's only second to Brock Bowers, honestly, from a target perspective.
Yeah, A tiers, these are all mediocre matchups. Njoku playing Denver, Jonnu Smith playing Green Bay, TJ Hawkinson, Arizona, and then Zach Ertz against Tennessee. And really, want to highlight Jonnu Smith here. He's jumped up. He has been outproducing. I mean, he had his targets in the last 2 games at least, but really on the season, he's the tight end 5 so far. 11 targets, 8 targets, but even going back, 4 targets, 6 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, 8 targets. Since week 5, he's been somebody that you have to have in your lineup. So at this point, he shouldn't be on your waivers. You should be starting him in your fantasy football leagues. There's no question about it. And then Hawk obviously still getting his feet under him. Zach Ertz in an offense where, again, you've got Jaden Daniels slinging the rock, and he trusts Zach Ertz, and that's a big thing.
Yeah, then the B tier, you're going to have Hunter Henry at the top. He's just been so consistent. Again, he's not going to lay a goose egg every week. He has a decent amount of target volume. He's probably not going to go crazy, but he does have a nice matchup against the Colts in the B tier. If you wanted him in the A tier, I wouldn't argue super hard about that. Evan Ingram, Dallas Goedert, and Mark Andrews will be next. They've been kind of inconsistent with their production, but they can have some solid weeks here and there. Dallas Goedert really has the best chance to be ultra productive, in my opinion, against Baltimore this week. And then Taysom Hill, you tell us when he's going to drop 5 or 45. That kind of leaves him in this range where I think you're seriously considering starting him every single week because of his big game upside, where he can win you a super, super crucial week heading into the playoffs. And then you got Kyle Pitts at the end of this tier. If he gets a touchdown, he drops 15. If he doesn't, he has less than 5. And then I'll just finish out the other 2 tiers here. They're very small. The C tier, you got Otton, Freiermuth, and Disley. Otton's on the way down. His volume went down right away once Mike Evans came back into that offense. Freiermuth, you know exactly what he is. Has a nice matchup against Cincinnati. Will Disley, you never really know with him. Sam Laporta and Kincaid are just name value at this point. They're droppable. And then Ferguson and Dawson Knox at the tail end of the D tier.
Dropping over to quarterbacks now, and let's do the S tier. There's 2 categories here: rushing upside or playing the Panthers. So as you can see, 4 of those guys are rushing upside, and then Baker Mayfield plays the Panthers this week. So Jalen Hurts also has a very good matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. We obviously elevated his receivers, and the other matchups are okay. It's the toughest matchup here is going to be Lamar Jackson, actually, in the same matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, who have not really allowed a lot of points to quarterbacks this year, but all those guys, again, rushing upside or playing the Panthers.
Yeah, at the A tier, at the top, we're going to have Kyler Murray. It's always tough to figure out when to put him in the S tier or below because you don't really know when he's going to drop 30 or 15. And he's been one of the more inconsistent quarterbacks this year, but his upside is so nice. So nice matchup this week against Minnesota. We expect, again, him to be passing the ball a lot. Maybe he can even make the most out of his rushing upside this week. Patrick Mahomes coming off the best game production-wise of the season. He had like a 28-point game against, guess who, Carolina. Now he's got Vegas, another friendly matchup, so we expect him to be solid. Justin Herbert had another rushing touchdown against Baltimore. That was really encouraging to see that this is starting to be sustainable for him. Same with Bo Nix. I mean, Bo Nix is, in my book, he's the rookie of the year to date. I think he's going to continue this really, really nice run and even run Denver into the playoffs. Honestly, he's been really solid, has a nice matchup against Cleveland. Joe Burrow has a tougher matchup against Pittsburgh. That's why he's lower this week. Generally, he's going to be higher, even flirting with S tier so often because his passing volume is ridiculous, but we'll be conservative with his outlook this week against Pittsburgh.
A couple tough matchups in this tier. Tua against Green Bay. 7th least points to quarterbacks this year. Brock Purdy has a tough matchup this week. You've got him going to Buffalo, and it is obviously banged up as well, so we'll kind of see with Purdy. Drake May has a fine matchup against the Colts. He gets elevated. He's a good start this week. Matt Stafford with a tough matchup against the Saints, who's given up the 8th least amount of points. Jared Goff playing the Chicago Bears, who've given up the third least amount of points, and Jordan Love, the second least amount of points against the Miami Dolphins. So some tough matchups. Again, I think Drake May of this is the best kind of streamer start this week. But all of these guys are guys that, again, are going to kind of be the tail end of the quarterback ones this weekend as we finish out with the C and D tier here.
Yeah, and we're going to have AR at the top of the C tier, along with Geno Smith. I can't even say anything about Anthony Richardson. He's so inconsistent. He's so bad. Geno Smith, Russell Wilson, CJ Stroud, all pocket passers here. Just depends on how much their passing volume can elevate their overall fantasy production, and if they can get passing touchdowns, and the running backs don't take away from that. Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins, same thing sort of applies with every single one of these guys. There's a trend outside of AR who's just inconsistent. And then the D tier, you're going to close out with Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Levis, Carr, and Winston. All those guys are kind of the last resort guys that you're looking to potentially start in week 13. No one else beyond that is even worth a look.
All right, there you go. Ultimate rankings for week 13. Like I said, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe. We'd love you guys. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you later.